Hello everyone, thank you for joining me again. Tonight is part 2 of my garden series. This is Brandy from Brandy Gale Health and Fitness. And Saturday I was talking about just an overview of doing a garden and explained how I kind of got into gardening. I've just decided that it was something that at first I thought looked like it was a lot of work, and I was right, it is, but I also found that it was very rewarding. So I wanted to share with you the things that I did last year to get my garden going, and then also share with you what I'm doing this year as I'm getting my garden planted this year. So the first step of planting a vegetable garden, of course, is finding a spot for your garden to go. With vegetables, they need several hours of full sun, at least 6. More is better. And so you want to make sure that you find a place that has sunlight throughout the day. And then you also want to make sure that you find a place that has enough space for everything you're wanting to plant. So there's a couple of different methods, and I will go over later or in another day methods of how to plant your garden and maximize the space. But just to get you started, like I said, we need to find a spot that has a lot of sunlight, and you also want to find a spot where your garden is not going to get trampled. So, I mean, if you have kids out there running around or whatever, you don't want it in the middle of your yard if it's going to cut their play space in half. So you want to put it towards the edge or near a fence or something like that. I put mine up against the garage, which I learned later that wasn't very smart because it didn't leave me any room to go on the back side of the garden to pick any of the vegetables or to do weed removal and things like that. So I've made it work, and I'm going to continue to leave it there just because that's where it is, and I don't particularly want to put the work into moving it right now. It's not saying in the future I'm not going to move it, but so try not to put it up against something where you can't get to that last row to weed and pick your vegetables. Of course, if it is in a spot where kids are playing or whatever, you can always put a fence around the outside of it or do a raised bed so that it's not level with the ground and it's less likely for it to get trampled on. Like I said, you also want to make sure that the spot that you pick has enough room to plant everything you want, and I will go over methods for planting that will maximize space as well. But keep in mind, certain items such as summer squash and melons, things like that, are viney and they need a lot of room. So last year I tried to plant squash in with my tomatoes and my peppers, and I had found that you can grow them up, and it did not work very well at all. It actually really prefers to sprawl out. So I would not suggest trying to grow a summer squash up. It just didn't work right, or at least not for me. Maybe you'll have better luck. Sorry, just wanted to check over my notes here real quick. If you have a limited space, something that you can consider also is container gardening. I know that things like tomatoes can go into containers and save up some of that ground space if you're looking to actually do a ground garden. So if you've got more items to plant than you have space in the ground, then container gardening might be an option to add a little bit more for you. So tomatoes and herbs, things like that, go really well in a container. So a little bit about my garden. It is about 4 feet wide by 12 feet long. Like I said, one edge is up against the garage, and it made it a little hard to get towards that back row. But I was able to fit 3 regular tomato plants, 2 cherry tomato plants, and I'm not sure, I think I had 5 or 6 pepper plants, and then I had a squash in the front corner of each of them so that it could grow out and over the edges of the bed, but I also was trying to grow it up into an upside down tomato cage. And I'm not real sure. Like I said, it didn't really work very well, but it was an idea that I had seen and wanted to try it. So I ended up, this year I'm going to plant my squash in another spot and not put it in the actual vegetable garden. So I discovered partway through the year, or through this growing season last year, that I had put too much in there, especially with the squash. That was just too much in the bed. And the tomatoes, I found out later you can actually prune tomatoes, which I was not aware of last year when I was doing this. And that would have helped immensely because my tomato plants got out of control and they were quite the jungle. I'll post a picture for it when I do my blog so that you can see how crazy and out of control they got. But that is something to keep in mind too. And then, so try to learn from my mistakes and not plant too much so that it's not crowded. And you don't want to. I would say a big tip is to start small. It's better to start small and not be overwhelmed than it is to go big and be overwhelmed and not be able to keep up with, like I said, weeding and things like that. And then, of course, you have to be able to eat the produce or freeze the produce or give the produce away, and that kind of, some people, that's what they prefer to do is garden and share the fruits of their labor. So that's up to you completely, but just keep in mind that whatever you plant, you also have to find a place to eat or store those vegetables. And I found that the space that I had actually was pretty perfect for me. It was easy enough for me to keep up on weeding it and things like that with the size that I had. So that was a fairly decent garden spot for me, and it had enough plants in it, and I was able to keep up on it pretty well. And so I think that's about it. Like I said, there's different methods of gardening that can help you maximize your space, and I will talk about those later in the series. Tomorrow night, please join me, and I will be talking about preparing your space now that you've discovered now that you've picked the spot that you want to have it. Now we're going to discuss preparing it so that you can actually plant. So I hope to see you tomorrow night. Bye.